Has anyone here ever seen the movie Fight Club?
Yeah.
A couple of us have seen Fight Club. Anyone read the book? One of us has read the book. That's awesome. In my notes it says, yeah, I didn't think so. Like I was ready for it to do that. If you've seen the movie, then you know in Fight Club, they say the first rule of Fight Club is you're not supposed to talk about Fight Club. So we're breaking the rules tonight. We're talking about Fight Club here at church. If you haven't seen it, then it is about a bored office worker who feels trapped by the monotony of modern life. And this bored office worker goes on to meet a mysterious soap salesman named Tyler Durden. And together the two start this underground fight club where dudes just like beat the heck out of each other. That's what happens in this movie. And the club grows and grows, and it quickly begins to turn into something far more dangerous and far more uncontrollable than it initially started out to become. So the first time you watch Fight Club, this is what you think it's about. Like throughout 99% of the movie, this is what you think the movie is about. This is the plot, and it's strange and confusing, and you kind of think about where is this movie headed, and you have no idea where this movie's headed. And then at the end, without giving any spoilers, so you can still watch it, you realize that something else was happening throughout the entire story. Like there's this plot going on the surface, but then there's something totally different happening underneath the surface. So tonight, like Brian said, we're continuing our sermon series through the book of Ruth. And I wanted to just start by telling you guys that I think the book of Ruth is basically exactly like Fight Club. Book of Ruth it's exactly like Fight Club, guys. So that's what we're going to talk about. You're going to have to trust me on this one. It's been a couple of weeks since we've heard about Ruth, and so let's just recap what we've talked about so far. If you remember a couple weeks ago, Preston told us that if we had to pick a genre for the book of Ruth, this would be a big, huge romance story. Just a big romance. And so here's what's happened in the first two chapters so far. Catch us up. A woman named Naomi and her family rebelled against God, and they moved away from Bethlehem to Moab. So they moved away from God's people to a country called Moab. Then all the dudes in the family died. Like 3 different husbands just struck down and died. So Naomi is left with 2 daughters-in-law, and she invites them to move back to Bethlehem with her. And one says no, but Ruth, she says yes. She says, I'm in. In fact, in chapter 1, Ruth gives this like epic promise to Naomi. She says, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And so the widows, they move back to Bethlehem. They have no lands, they have no money, they have no hope of any kind of quality of life. So Ruth, she goes to work in the fields to provide for herself and for her family, Naomi. And in the fields, Ruth meets a man named Boaz. And she quickly discovers Boaz is awesome. He's the best. He owns the fields. Boaz offers her water. He's kind to her. He offers her protection. And so the two have lunch. They start to hit it off. He offers her a ton of barley, and the rest is history. Just a classic romance story. And so for the first 2 weeks in church, we've talked about things like repentance. We've talked about dating. And we've talked about how to pursue a future or your current spouse. And that's where we pick up in chapter 3. So let me just start by telling you guys, chapter 3 gets a little strange. This chapter's a little weird. We're going to read it together. If you have a Bible, go ahead and turn to Ruth chapter 3, verse 1. It says this. It says, then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you? Is not Boaz our relative, with whose young women you were? See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash therefore, and anoint yourself, and put on your cloak, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies, and then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And she replied, all that you say, I will do. You guys see what I mean? A little bit weird in Ruth chapter 3. Naomi, she says to Ruth, she says, hey, last time Boaz saw you, you've been like crawling around in the fields. You were dirty, Ruth. You were stinky. This time, go clean yourself up, Ruth. Do your nails, put on your nice cloak, and then go and meet Boaz. But, says Naomi, don't do it like a normal person. Nope, I want you to spy on him. And then when he goes to sleep, I want you to just take those blankets right off his feet. There you go. Interesting plan, Naomi. A couple weeks ago, Preston preached from Ruth chapter 2, and his theme was how to find a spouse. And after reading this, I feel obligated to tell you guys, this is not how we find a spouse, people. 2025, this ain't going to work. But I do think we can look at this text and highlight a couple things about Ruth's character in this text. So first, let's talk about Ruth's loyalty. Ruth's loyalty. This is in your notes. Remember where we're at in the story. Ruth and Naomi are back in Bethlehem. They're two widows in a patriarchal world where women without husbands struggle. They had it hard. They were vulnerable. They faced economic hardship. They were without husbands to protect and provide for them. And so Ruth starts working in Boaz's fields, and sure, they kind of hit it off. There's some chemistry brewing, but she's still desperate for stability. And so here are Ruth's options. She's got a couple options. Option number one, Ruth could run back to Moab and hope that some family member or friend kind of takes her in. But that would mean breaking her promise to Naomi. Remember, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. So option one isn't great. Option number two, Ruth could turn to something like prostitution, like many women, many widows of the day would turn to. This would certainly put food on the table, but it would compromise and destroy her integrity and her faith. So option number three, Ruth could stick with Naomi. She could pursue Boaz, and she could double down on her promise and commitment to these people and to their God. And so when we read that Ruth washes and anoints herself before going to Boaz, she's not just like getting ready for a hot date. She is getting ready for a sacred moment. This is a deliberate act of loyalty on Ruth's part. This is Ruth saying, I'm all in. I'm all in on this plan and this commitment. This is a renewal of her pledge to Naomi and to God's people. This text is describing a crossroads moment for Ruth, where she could choose to run from God, run from her commitments, or she could run to sin and towards moral depravity, or she could choose loyalty and commitment and faith. And so we in this room will be wise to just look at Ruth and learn from her loyalty and her strength. Let's keep reading. Verse 6 says this. It says, So she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly and uncovered his feet, and she lay down. So next, I want to highlight Ruth's courage. Her courage. Ruth listens to Naomi, and then she sneaks down to the threshing floor, and she waits for Boaz to go to sleep. So if you're like me, you likely don't know what a threshing floor is. That was me just a couple of days ago. So I looked it up. And in ancient Israel, a threshing floor was a flat, open area where workers or farmers would come to separate their grain from the chaff. So to separate what they wanted from what they didn't want. And a threshing floor is actually really symbolic in the Bible. And a threshing floor is often a place of testing or a place of trial, or in many stories, it's a place where God meets his people, that God speaks to his people at the threshing floor. So keep that in mind as we keep reading. The threshing floor is a place where men would work late, they'd sometimes get rowdy, and men like Boaz would often have to sleep at the threshing floor, so thieves would come and steal the grain. So this isn't a safe space for a lone woman to sneak into during the night, especially a foreign lone woman like Ruth. So imagine just for a moment, imagine that you're Ruth. Imagine you're sneaking into this male-dominated space. You could easily be mistaken for a thief, or worse, you could be taken advantage of by one of the men. This was an act of courage. And Ruth had already set her course. She'd already made a plan and decided that she was going to commit to these people and to this plan. So she sneaks down quietly, uncovers Boaz's feet, and she lays down. We've got to talk about this feet thing, right? If I snuck into my bedroom while my wife was sleeping, and I uncovered her feet, she would probably think it was some kind of a prank, right? It would probably take courage, because something bad might happen to me. But it would have been some kind of prank. In this day, though, this was no prank. Ruth was performing a great act of humility and submission. No prank. This was the first step in Ruth's master plan that we're going to read about in just a moment. This was yet another act of courage to show a man that she was willing to submit to him. An act of courage. Let's keep going. Verse 8. Verse 8, at midnight, the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." Thirdly, we can admire Ruth's boldness in this text. Ruth's boldness. I love this part of the story because Boaz is like a real person. He's like not just okay that someone snuck in and uncovered his feet, woke him up, like freaks out, rubs his eyes, and says, "Who are you? What is going on here?" And Ruth is bold. Ruth says, "It's me. It's your servant Ruth. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer." In these times, to spread your wings over someone meant to protect them, to offer them protection, to take responsibility for them, to shield them from present or future harm. So guys, this is Ruth's way of saying, "Boaz, will you marry me? Will you marry me?" So uncovering his feet was like this humble act of getting down on one knee, and then asking this question to spread his wings over her is like saying, "Will you marry me?" Ruth is indeed bold. As I was writing this sermon, I was sitting at my desk this whole last week looking at a photo. Right here on my desk, here's the photo. Been looking at this photo all week. Guys, this was the boldest moment of my whole life. I was nervous probably for months leading up to this photo. Molly had no idea this was coming. Not saying that's a great idea. Might have been a great idea. She had no idea. She, in the days leading up, just that weekend, I had been sending her like fake pictures from the Mariners game, so she thought I was in Seattle when she was in Pullman. Really trying to surprise her. And then on May 5th, 2018, Molly pulls into a parking lot of like this scenic view spot in Pullman, Washington, and she thinks she's just going up to watch the sunset with some friends. But then as I got out of the car, I had a friend hand her a letter that just said simply in my handwriting, "I'll see you at the top." And so she probably gets immediately nervous. I wasn't there, I don't know. She walks up the hill, and along the way she finds her mom and some best friends who had flown in or drove into town to celebrate with her. And then at the top, she finds me ready to read her a letter and to tell her I love you for the first time. And so I read the letter, got down on a knee, and I asked Molly to marry me. This is easily the boldest moment of my life. So when we read about Ruth's proposal, let's remember how bold she is being in this moment. And this wasn't 2025 or 2018. Women weren't just popping the question in 1000 BC, especially women with zero social leverage. This is boldness on steroids. So here we see Ruth continuing to risk everything in order to keep her promise to Naomi and to these new people, in order to secure a provider for her family, in order to secure what she calls here a redeemer. And that word is important, a redeemer. And that brings us to the last point about Ruth's character. I want to highlight Ruth's dependence. Ruth's dependence. "For you are a redeemer," Ruth says to Boaz. You're a redeemer. This isn't just sweet jargon, romantic jargon to sweeten her proposal. This is an important word. In this short phrase, Ruth is pleading with Boaz to step into a sacred role from God's law. Here's what I mean. In Hebrew, the word redeemer is translated goel, G-O-E-L, goel. And it's a title that means rescuer, deliverer, redeemer. And this word is most often used to describe God. It's rarely used to describe humans. But in Leviticus 25, a goel is used to describe what is called a kinsman redeemer. It's used to describe a type of human, a role for a human, a relative kinsman redeemer. So here's a definition for you. This is in your notes. A kinsman redeemer is a male relative who, according to various laws found in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, had the privilege or responsibility to act for a relative who was in trouble, danger, or in need of vindication. So when Ruth calls Boaz a goel, she's effectively placing her life in his hands and saying, "Will you please rescue me? Will you please step in and protect your relative who is in trouble? Please step in and protect your relative who is hungry and is in need of provision. Will you please give me and my family a future inheritance?" She's expressing her utter dependence on Boaz and his answer to this plea. When I think about dependence, I can't help but think about my son Charlie. That dude is totally dependent on me and his mom for survival. We will like play in our backyard, and we have this little deck that's like a foot or two off the ground. And he'll just walk right off. He doesn't care. I know. So dependent on us. Or like we have to monitor how much food we put on his high chair tray. Because he shovels it in. Like he'll choke. So we have to really monitor what goes on there. He is utterly dependent on us. So whether it's Ruth's dependence or Charlie's dependence, this week as I thought about this idea, this had me asking questions like, do I understand just how dependent I am on God? Like, has this reality gripped me like it gripped Ruth? Do I understand the stakes of living life on earth apart from Jesus? Important questions that we all should be asking. Do I understand the stakes of life on earth apart from God? Now let's keep reading. Here's verse 10. Here's Boaz's answer. And he said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, and that you have not gone after young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask. For all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. And now it is true that I am a redeemer. Yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. So remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good. Let him do it. But if he's not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning." So Boaz praises Ruth's character. He blesses her. He calls her a worthy woman, and then he says yes to her proposal. But he has a caveat. He says there actually may be a nearer relative who might have the right to marry you instead of me. And because I'm a man of character, Boaz, I want to go and investigate this other relative. And then the two, they go to sleep. And I think it's just worth noting for us in the room that we can assume, because we've seen Boaz's character, Ruth's character, that there were no shenanigans, no sketchy behavior happening this evening. The text even says she slept by his feet for the remainder of the night. And I just wanted to pause and say to this room, just because we have some semblance of commitment does not mean we can start acting like we're married. That's what we get from here. Just because we have some level of commitment doesn't mean we can start acting like we're married. One night, before Molly and I got married, before we were even engaged, I think we planned to stay the night at my dad's girlfriend's house. And we didn't know her super well. And so she had set up like a bed in a bedroom for Molly and I. And I was a dummy. I'll start there. So I had two thoughts. My first thought was, well, it'd be really awkward to go and just reject her hospitality, right? It'd be so awkward to go ask for a sleeping bag. And the second thought was, this is awesome. This is amazing. I knew in that moment I wasn't supposed to sleep in bed with Molly, but I was like, I can sleep on the floor right next to her. We could wake up in the morning. It would just be so special and wonderful. But lucky for me, I was dating a woman of character. And so she kicked me out. She forced me to go sleep downstairs in a sleeping bag. I remember that night. And I'm thankful for that moment. So just because there's some level of commitment doesn't mean we can start acting like we're married. Finally, this chapter ends the next day with Boaz again providing for Ruth and her family richly, gives her a ton of barley, again, don't know why that's his thing, and he sends her on her way so he can go investigate this other relative. Guys, that is Ruth chapter 3. That's it right there. That's Ruth chapter 3 in a nutshell. And as I've read the book of Ruth over the last couple weeks, I just had this question over and over. And I wonder if you've had this question as we've studied this book. I kept thinking, why is this in the Bible? Like, why is this book in the Bible? Like, I know it's a killer romance, right? We have midnight proposals and a hunky hero who gives barley to everyone, and there's like sparks flying at the threshing floor. It's awesome. And we could learn a couple things from Ruth's character, right? But like, why is this short love story, which barely mentions God, it's in the Word of God? Like, why is this in the Bible? And so I've done some investigating. This book, what I've learned, was treasured by ancient Jews. It was treasured by God's people. So what I mean is they would like read this book out loud every single year at certain festivals, alongside other books of the Bible, right there alongside Solomon and his other writings in the Old Testament. Our first transcripts of Ruth date back to about 200 years before Jesus. That's what we found so far. But we think it was probably written 1,000 years before the time of Jesus. And so the short romantic story has been part of the Hebrew Bible for thousands of years. So again, I wonder why? Why is to share tonight. Here's what I think. That God's people didn't care about Ruth because it's this sweet romantic story. God's people cared about Ruth because it's Fight Club. They didn't care about it because it's a romance, a sweet love story. They cared because there's something happening under the surface. On the surface, Ruth is this beautiful romance packed with relationship advice and moral lessons that are good and we should learn from them. But underneath, this is a divine drama. Like God's people recognize in this story elements of the human condition and how God responds to the human condition. They recognize a story of divine redemption embedded in Ruth's story. 1,000 years before Jesus walked the earth, this short story points to a great Redeemer who will rescue humanity from their brokenness and darkness. As Jesus is the true and greater Boaz. He's the true and greater Boaz. When you get to the end of Fight Club, you get hit with this plot twist. It kind of unlocks the rest of the movie for you. It changes the entire movie. And then you go back and you rewatch it with new eyes and you start to notice stuff that you should have seen the whole way. And this is our Fight Club moment, plot twist moment. This unlocks the rest of Ruth. Jesus is the true and greater Boaz. If you go back and you reread Ruth, here are some things you may notice with new eyes. Boaz, a man from Bethlehem, clue number one, brought hope to a widow in Bethlehem's fields. And Jesus, born in Bethlehem, brought eternal hope to humanity from a manger. Boaz is introduced as a worthy man. It says in the text he honors God with integrity and character. And Jesus is the only man worthy of heaven who honored God by living a perfectly righteous life. Boaz offers water to a thirsty and desperate Ruth. In the New Testament, we read about Jesus meeting a woman at a well and offering her living water. Boaz protects Ruth from men who might harm her, and Jesus shields us from the enemy seeking to destroy us. Boaz is lavishly generous. He sends Ruth home with barley, way too much barley, so much she can't carry. And Jesus generously pours out grace upon grace on his people. Naomi sends Ruth and Boaz to find rest and security. But Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Boaz is Ruth's Goel, her kinsman redeemer. And Jesus is the ultimate kinsman redeemer for humanity. Jesus left heaven, he wrapped himself in flesh so he could truly be our kinsman. He could truly be one of us. He understands the pain and the troubles of life on earth. He understands the trials and temptations of life on earth. He is truly, fully human. He's our kinsman. And he's the only one worthy of being our Redeemer. He's the only one who ever lived a perfect life and is worthy for heaven. He's the only one who could look at a desperate and broken humanity and say with Boaz in verse 13, I will redeem you. I will be your Redeemer. Colossians 1, verse 13 through 14 says this. It says, He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. This is the good news, guys. Because of the death, the burial, and resurrection of Jesus, we have redemption. Our sins can be forgiven. We have a Goel. We have a kinsman redeemer who offers us new life and a fresh start. So we, like Ruth, can be delivered from a life of darkness and despair and hopelessness. We can be transferred into a new way of life that brings about blessing and flourishing and security. So for us tonight, that is the invitation. The invitation is to come to Jesus. If you're not a follower of Jesus, then hear this. Your sins, your brokenness, your distance from God does not disqualify you. In fact, Jesus sees you, just as Boaz saw Ruth, and he's willing to look towards you. He's willing to forgive you. You can turn to Jesus tonight, and you can ask him to spread his wings over you as your protector and your redeemer. And if you are a follower of Jesus, then this story invites you into a deeper sense of trust. Trust that Jesus is our great redeemer. Trust that he's making all things new. Trust that he will forgive all of your past, present, and future sins. Trust that he's near to you. He's wholly committed to you as a husband committed to his wife. You can ask Jesus to fill you with hope this evening and gratitude over all the things that he's accomplished in your life. And then finally, all of us, I think, can learn from Ruth. We can approach our Redeemer as she approached hers. We can approach the throne room of grace just like she approached Boaz on the threshing floor. So here's 4 ways she approaches again. Same 4 points. We should come to Jesus with unwavering loyalty. We should pledge our life fully to Jesus, recognizing that he alone is worthy of our commitment and our devotion. Number 2, we should come with undaunted courage. Undaunted courage. We can step boldly toward Jesus, unafraid to confront fears and surrender our doubts. Courage. Number 3, we should come with unshakable boldness. Unshakable boldness. We can bring our greatest needs before the Lord and our deepest desires before him, trusting that he values our audacious faith. And 4, we should come with utter dependence. Come with utter dependence. We should know our need before the Lord. Know the stakes of life on earth apart from King Jesus. Doesn't it? May we be like Ruth as we approach Jesus tonight and this week and in the weeks to come.